This is Fresh Tracks Weekly. A little reminder, if you want to just listen to the audio of this, you can do that on any of the major podcast platforms, so feel free to check it out there as well. So last weekend, I went out one last time to try to fill my bear tag. Kara and I went out and hiked our butts off, but we did not find any bears. We did get some good exercise, and we saw some elk, we saw some new country, so it was a success, but Montana's bear season is now over, so no bear for me this year. But Randy was up in Southeast Alaska last week with his niece Jordann and brother Jason chasing bears, so stay tuned for that hunt. Our field producer Jace was up there filming the hunt, and he is actually still in Alaska. He decided to stay an extra week. He has his own bear tag, and his family is meeting him up there, so they're going to chase some bears and do some fishing as well. So we'll have to get an update from him when he gets back. Other exciting news, Paul Kemper, our production coordinator, just got married.
Married life is awesome, and yeah, the wedding was great. We had sunshine, we had quite a bit of rain, and then it cleared. We had an epic sunset and a double rainbow. So yeah, it couldn't have gone any better. We kayaked a whole bunch on Flathead, and I fished every dock in that cove with a Senko, with a crankbait, with swim baits. I drowned a night crawler all night to see if a bass would pick it up, and I only saw one fish in that cove, but we hit some little lakes a little bit north of Flathead and picked up quite a few fish, and it was like that redemption right at the end of the trip. Crushed some burgers on the way home, and it was like the perfect way to cap it off. It's good to be back and see everyone. I missed everyone, but it was like my first vacation since I was in 7th grade, so I'll take the 10 days of sleep. Yeah, it was awesome.
Looked like a great time. Congrats to Paul and Jordann. It's been a wild week in Montana. The rivers are crazy. So Michael is going to give us the update on everything going on there.
What's up, fishing people? It's Michael over here in the fishing corner. Last weekend I was out of town in Boulder, Colorado for a wedding, so I didn't get to go out and dangle as much as I wanted to. This week we had a serious push of water coming through in southwest Montana. Red Lodge was completely underwater from Rock Creek, and the Yellowstone registered its highest value ever recorded. So we had some serious damage from that, like our road systems, the parks closed, Livingston was evacuated. It was crazy. The bridges being ripped out. Yeah, it was insane. So not a whole lot of fishing being done this week. I did head out to my backyard, got a few clips of that. It was beautiful scenery. The fishing was lackluster. I caught one brown, but besides that, it's just been super slow here. We got some clips of the Gallatin River raging the other day. Another river that's just registered. I don't want to say it was the highest value ever, but it very well could have been. But it's wet here in Montana, and we got a weekend full of warm weather and a lot of snowpack, so we'll see what happens. My plan is to go hit some tailwaters and maybe fish a lake. Tip for fishing high water: if you're trout fishing in the river, find that slow stuff near the bank, and you might catch a big one this time of year. So that's really it from the fishing corner. Day 91 will be tonight. On my quest to 200 days in 2022. Back to you, Marcus.
Crazy reminder of how wild nature can be. It's so bad that the Gallatin National Forest has actually closed down huge chunks of land. I'm talking over 1 million acres that is closed down to all public access right now. So hopefully that won't last long. Hopefully everything calms down, but it's pretty unprecedented. It's wild times for sure. Also, to let you know, there will be no Fresh Tracks Weekly next week. I will be out of the office, so we will be delayed a week before we have the next episode. But with that, we'll jump into some news. Vail, Colorado, often known to have long lift lines at the ski resort and backed up traffic on the interstate. At least that's what I've been seeing in the press in the last few years. A lot of the coverage is focused on massive upticks in visitors into the area. It's a very popular spot, but the surrounding area of Vail is also home to some incredible wildlife. There's some really cool habitat right around the town, and that's what recently caught my eye. Vail Resorts has been attempting to develop a 5-acre piece of property close to the town for affordable employee housing. So there's been a lot of backlash against the resort for wanting to build on what has been found to be very important Bighorn sheep winter range. The town of Vail said they had a good faith deal with the resort to maintain wildlife habitat while they were building their new housing developments. The town claiming to have upheld their end of the deal by agreeing to build additional employee housing on a different spot, but they're claiming that the resort went back on its word and is now moving forward with the plan to build on that winter range area. It's been a back and forth for years, but in the last few months it's got more heated as the town council voted to potentially condemn the land. The town claims to have offered up multiple alternative solutions to their housing needs, while the resort cites that the project had already been previously approved and that the town will continue to face many housing shortages in the future. A group has been formed around this issue called the Vail Bighorn Sheep Initiative, and they have been advocating through various platforms, including releasing a mini documentary of sorts that's very well done. I'll put a link in the video description. It's a collaborative effort that gives a background into bighorn sheep in the area and the threats that they face, primarily pointing towards the housing development on that winter range. The status currently is that the condemnation is going to continue. The town plans to hold firm on that unless the resort commits to working on alternative solutions. Vail has faced a lot of other criticism as well, especially in the last 4 to 5 years, as they have been going on a buying spree, buying up small ski resorts and creating almost a monopoly in the industry. That, combined with selling their Epic passes, which gets customers access to numerous resorts, has been cited with being the reason for excessive crowding. It kind of reminds me of the movie Out Cold, where it's a small town ski hill being bought out by a rich developer. Classic movie, check it out. It's just a classic scenario. What is good for business conflicts with what's good for wildlife and what's good for the locals. It's never going to change. Everyone's going to fight for their piece of the pie. But as someone who grew up skiing at a small ski hill, Maverick Mountain, and studied wildlife, I'm on Team Bighorn Sheep and small town culture. The Recovering America's Wildlife Act just passed the House. This is a big step in getting a good piece of legislation through. It's on to the Senate now, so we'll see what happens. A little reminder on what the Recovering America's Wildlife Act would accomplish. It would direct existing revenues from oil and gas extraction, $1.397 billion to be exact, towards wildlife conservation. And you might think that sounds very similar to Land and Water Conservation Fund, which it kind of is in terms of taking royalties from oil and gas development to pay for conservation. Where these two programs are different is that the Land and Water Conservation Fund focuses primarily on land issues and land access, where Recovering America's Wildlife Act focuses on wildlife. It's just a little more wildlife focused, which is cool. $1.3 billion would go towards state wildlife agencies, enabling them to take a proactive approach to conserving wildlife and help keep species off of the endangered species list, while the remaining $97.5 million would go towards tribal wildlife conservation efforts. This act has a lot of support from diverse groups, both Republicans and Democrats, so it actually has a real shot of passing. Hopefully, this momentum continues. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service released a proposal that would expand hunting and fishing opportunities on 19 National Wildlife Refuges, adding 54,000 acres of land that would become available for various hunting and fishing activities. Within the same proposal, the Fish and Wildlife Service noted that lead ammunition and tackle may have negative impacts on wildlife and human health, and said that they are going to evaluate the future of using lead on service lands and waters. Basically, the Fish and Wildlife Service plans to open up a lot of access to hunting and fishing, but at the same time evaluating the use of lead on these lands and waters. And they are going to start phasing it out in certain locations, starting with some of these newly accessible areas where lead will be prohibited. So it has faced criticism because of this, because they are saying that it is getting their foot in the door to ban all lead. But I think it is fair to mention that lead ammunition and fishing tackle are already prohibited on a lot of national refuge lands. All waterfowl hunting has long required non-lead ammunition, and waterfowl hunting is one of the biggest opportunities on these refuges. I think it's also important to mention that there is sound science that shows that lead can have negative impacts on fish and wildlife. However, we also know that an outright ban on lead ammunition would lead to negative impacts to hunters, as there are not enough non-lead alternatives out there, nor is it cost effective currently. So it's unclear to me if these proposed regulation changes are an all or nothing package. To me, having more access for hunting and fishing is always something to support. It appears that it's not a blanket ban on lead yet. It's just a step moving that direction, but maybe there's more to it that I don't see. So if there is, let me know, drop a comment below. In Wyoming, recent news has come to light about proposed changes to the hunting regulations, primarily as it relates to the allocation of tags to non-residents. So Randy is jumping in to fill us in on exactly what's going on this week's Deeper Dive. Some changes happening in Wyoming, maybe.
Maybe.
Seems like
It could be really big changes.
I'm going to rely on you for a lot of this because I'm uneducated in a lot of the non-resident stuff, but it's pretty
Wow.
I've just been trying to read up on it today, and it's
Yeah. Well,
trying to wrap my head around everything. So exactly what's being proposed and who are the...
Yeah. A little background. Wyoming, every once in a while, puts together these task force. Right now, there's a page out there called the Wyoming Wildlife Task Force, and the governor, I believe, or the director, appoints people to be on that task force, and they take on certain issues. Well, we know that earlier this year, they took on the issue of the non-resident resident allocation for moose, goat, sheep, bison, and grizzly bear.
Right.
And that went from 75% to 90% for residents.
So
the
75% of the tags previously went to the residents, and then
Yeah.
25% would go into the non-resident
Right.
application. But
now
then they
that's
changed it.
switched 90-10. 90 to
Gotcha.
residents,
Yeah.
10 to non-residents. Which everyone thought, well, that's kind of where they're going to stop. Well, they've been having these meetings, and now there's a push to change deer, elk, and antelope to 90-10. And right now, elk is 16% to non-residents, 84% to residents.
Okay.
And it's 20% for deer and antelope to non-residents and 80%. So I'd change that to 90-10.
Right.
Which, our home state of Montana is 90-10. I get it. If I was a Wyoming resident,
Yeah.
I'd be wanting that too.
Well, and that's if they can make it pay, because that's a lot of the thing in a lot of these non-resident scenarios. That's a huge portion of the budget coming in, right? Because the non-resident tags cost way more than a resident tag. And
30x.
a
in
lot of the
Montana.
times in a lot of these states, like Montana, definitely a huge
Yeah.
cost difference between a resident and non-resident. So the non-residents are funding a big portion of the wildlife management in the state, but there's different workarounds that I'm sure they're doing to make it so they're not going to lose
The revenue. Yeah.
the revenue.
But here's the big thing that came up in the last 2 weeks. The Wyoming Outfitter and Guide Association has said, we will only agree with this 90-10 allocation if you give us 40 or 50% of the non-resident tags.
And that's because these guides and outfitters rely on mostly non-residents
Yeah.
for their clients.
Right.
So that's what if you're going to take away, or that's their argument, right?
Right.
You're going to take away some of the non-residents, so we want to, be assured that we're going to get our fair share.
Our share.
So yeah.
The real question, I guess, in my mind is, where does the non-resident fit in all this? And, we had the same problem last legislative session in Montana. Mm-hmm. The Montana Outfitter and Guides Association came forward and asked for 40% of our non-resident tags. Mm-hmm. And we as residents fought that. We're like, no way. Because we remember back in the day, we used to have an outfitter pool here in Montana. That we got rid of it through a citizens ballot initiative. Mm-hmm. But for those of us old and gray enough to remember before that, and then what was promised as part of that, was that the outfitting industry would track a baseline of how many acres they leased, which we never got, and that they wouldn't go on a leasing binge. Because when you think about it, and if you're a business person, you're like, well, my risk is less. I've got this guaranteed revenue stream. Right. I'm going to go lease a lot more property. That's just smart business. So.
And then land access program like Montana's block management or Wyoming's walk-in areas, it's hard to compete with what these outfitters are able to pay for leasing land. Right. So that's like one of the big cruxes of this, right?
I mean, if I'm a Wyoming resident, I might be thinking, well, this doesn't hurt me at all.
That's what, because I think on the surface, it's like, well, there's going to be less non-residents competing for the tags that I want to go out and enjoy the public land. So like on the surface, it seems like it's probably a win for a Wyoming resident.
Right. The thing I would caution Wyoming residents is, if you can, go and look at what happened in Montana.
Yeah.
When we took a big portion of this public resource and we said, we're going to funnel a large part of that revenue of non-residents through a small group of businesses. They went on a huge leasing binge, and they'll say, you can't prove that. And the reason you can't prove that is because they didn't keep track of it and report it like was promised. Mm-hmm. But there's not a single resident hunter in Montana who you could talk to who would say, their access got better. Because even if it wasn't block management that couldn't compete with these leasing dollars,
Yeah.
a lot of places where people just had, I'm a school teacher and they let us come out and hunt for a weekend. All of that stuff got leased up. So the group that is most impacted by this displacement when these leasing activities go crazy because you lower business risk and you give a big revenue stream, the people impacted are the resident hunters.
Yeah.
So if Wyoming says, hey, we want to go to 90-10, you know what? I'm fine with that. Wyoming residents should do what they want.
Right.
I'm just here raising the flag saying, we've seen this movie before.
There's more to it than what's on the surface. Yeah.
Don't let it be sold to you, because this task force brought in some outfitter representatives from New Mexico and from Montana to proclaim what a great deal these programs are.
Yeah.
And no one told them the other side of it.
Like the real simplified view of it in my mind too is it's just another one of those things that's moving towards privatization of wildlife and just rewarding those who have the deepest pockets, which is just kind of disappointing. And we talk about the North American model a bunch, and it's just like veering away from that. And it's like, let's not forget how we got to have all this amazing wildlife. And you get more of the risk of saying like the normal human, the normal citizen able to contribute and be able to participate in hunting, the harder it gets for them to do that. It's just, it just makes it that much less likely that they're going to advocate for wildlife, that much less likely that they are going to care about wild places. And so it's just a step in that direction to me, and it's just disappointing, I guess.
It's super disappointing. Now, here is the thing I would tell people: go out to the task force, Google it, Wyoming Wildlife Task Force, and it lists all the members.
Yeah.
And some of them have already said, I don't want to hear from non-residents. But there are some of them. I've been on the phone with 2 of them this morning and swapped emails with 2 more of them. Who are like, thanks for your input. No one's telling us this story of how guaranteed revenue streams result in huge increases in leasing, which results in a huge displacement of resident hunters and causes state access programs to have a harder time competing. Yeah. So contact them. I mean, it might seem futile.
Right. I think they're less likely probably to, listen to you if it's a sob story about, me, like you're hurting me. But if you, like you're saying, you explain the bigger story and there's unintended consequences other than just us like having a harder time drawing an elk tag in Wyoming. It's more than that. It's not,
If Wyoming goes to 90-10, I say, you know what, it's your wildlife allocated how you want, and I'll deal with it. But when you think about this wildlife resource and the opportunity that comes from that resource was built by tons of excise taxes, license fees, volunteerism, advocacy. And so it reaches some point, and along comes a small group that says, we're going to use the political levers to funnel a whole bunch of that to us. That I don't care who you are. If you believe in these American systems of free enterprise and business standing on its own, and these ideas of the public trust doctrine, you can't look at that proposal and not laugh out loud. And I don't care. I know you're going to get some heated emails over this, Mark. I said the way I'm saying it, but this resource wasn't built by one small group of people. It was built by everybody, primarily the Wyoming residents, and we're using Wyoming in this case. But I would bet any money in Montana, we have a new legislative session coming next year, we're going to see similar bills. They got it going in New Mexico. The reason it's able to foster the way it is they do a great job of pitting the resident self-guided hunter against the non-resident self-guided hunter. And they work that leverage. And from a business standpoint, I'm not faulting them. Every business is trying to get whatever angle they can, but that doesn't mean we got to sit here and take it either.
Right, and I think, there's great outfitters, there's great, guides and outfitters that do a great job, but it's just, it's hard to advocate for these essentially subsidies, a heavy subsidy on their business. It's like, okay, well, you gotta, you can't just have a handout.
Yeah.
You gotta earn your clients, earn your, the whole
Right.
thing. But and that's, maybe this is stretching, but I wonder too if as far as small town economies go, because a lot of times non-resident hunters contribute to small town economies, and you wonder if that wealth is spread out a little more from the self-guided guy. I don't know. I might be reaching there a little
No,
bit.
it's
Versus
not.
if you go to an outfitted lodge or whatever, you're consolidating a lot of that revenue into one business, and you are contributing to the economy. But you're not going to all those different diners or hotels or taxidermists, whatever. It's all funneled through kind of a narrower.
I know
business.
how old you are, Marcus. And when you were 3 years old, I went to Forsyth, Montana, eastern Montana. This is before we had our outfitter set aside. You couldn't get a hotel for the first couple weekends of antelope season or deer season. I had an antelope tag, and it's like, I can't get a hotel. Finally, the last weekend of antelope season, which was like the second or third weekend of deer season, I finally got a hotel. And I went over there and I filled my tags. Now, you go over there, all the hotels, all the restaurants, you can get, you want a room? Oh, sure, yeah. So it affects a lot of things. Like you said, we refer a ton of people to outfitters because we get the question all the time, and we got some great friends in the outfitting business.
Yeah.
But when their associations come and try to leverage this public resource in this way, I think most hunters just are like, that doesn't feel good to me. And whatever Wyoming does, now Colorado, just a couple, I think a month or two ago, they put together a panel to review their allocation.
Gotcha.
So Colorado and Wyoming are the two most generous states to non-residents. We start having a cranking down of opportunity in those two states, the cumulative size of the non-resident hunting pie in the West is going to get a lot tighter. And would we blame those states if we lived there?
No, I get it. I mean, I understand. I can totally see the reasoning, but it's just the unintended consequences. I think that it's just hopefully people are aware of.
Right, and hopefully Wyoming residents see this. If you want to call it a deal, they're calling it the Great Compromise.
Yeah.
Hopefully Wyoming residents see that and they push back and say, look, we want 90-10, but we're not in for this.
Yeah.
Set aside.
We'll put a link in the description for the Wyoming
Taskforce.
Taskforce, and then you can always email us at weekly@freshtracks.tv. I remembered the email that time.
All right, he's getting good at this.